The Young and the Restless spoilers. Sharon's world had always been fragile, a delicate balance between the love she held for her family and the inner demons that lurked in the corners of her mind. But now, that balance had been shattered, leaving her vulnerable to the darkest corners of her psyche. Cameron, a figure from her past, had resurfaced in the most horrifying way. No longer just a man, but a twisted apparition, a monstrous entity that seemed determined to consume her entirely. Cameron had become an insidious force, whispering in Sharon's ear, manipulating her every thought, every emotion. He fed off her insecurities, fears, turning her into a puppet whose strings he pulled with expert precision. What was once Sharon's determination to protect her loved ones had been perverted into a malevolent drive to eliminate anything and anyone she perceived as a threat. Lucy had become the target of this twisted vendetta, symbol of all that Sharon feared she could lose. Sharon's descent into madness had been gradual. The signs were there for anyone who cared to look. The restless nights, paranoid glances over her shoulder, the whispered conversations with someone who wasn't there. Cameron had embedded himself in her mind, twisting her thoughts, distorting her reality. He made her believe that the only way to keep her family safe was to destroy the source of her pain, Lucy. It wasn't an easy decision for Sharon, but under Cameron's relentless influence, felt like the only choice. In the dead of night, Sharon had prepared the poison, her hands trembling as she filled the syringe. It was a potent concoction, something she knew would be fatal if ingested. She justified her actions by telling herself that it was for the greater good, that Lucy's removal from their lives would bring peace. She envisioned a life where the specter of loss no longer haunted her, where Cameron's voice would finally be silenced. The plan was simple: inject the poison into Lucy's water bottle, wait for her to drink it, and let the darkness take her away. But fate had other plans. Daniel, ever vigilant, had sensed that something was wrong. He noticed Sharon's erratic behavior, the way she seemed disconnected from reality, lost in her own world. His suspicions grew until he could no longer ignore them. And when he discovered the syringe hidden among Sharon's things, his heart sank. He knew instantly what it meant. Sharon was planning something terrible. Daniel acted quickly, his mind racing as he tried to piece together Sharon's plan. Confronted her, demanding to know what she intended to do. But Sharon was no longer the woman he knew. She was a hollow shell, filled with Cameron's venomous influence. She denied everything at first, but under Daniel's relentless questioning, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed her intentions, her voice trembling with fear and desperation. "I had to do it, Daniel," Sharon sobbed. "Cameron told me. He told me it's the only way to keep everyone safe. Lucy, she's the reason for all of this. If she's gone, everything will be okay again." Daniel's heart ached as he listened to her words, knowing that Sharon had lost touch with reality. Called the police, knowing that he had no other choice. Sharon needed help, and he was powerless to give it to her. The police arrived quickly, their presence adding to Sharon's growing panic. She recoiled from them, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected Cameron to appear at any moment. When the officers questioned her, Sharon's response was incoherent, her mind a chaotic swirl of fear and delusion. She insisted that Cameron was behind her, speaking to him as though he were a ghostly figure standing in the shadows. Officers exchanged concerned glances, realizing that Sharon's mental state was far worse than they had anticipated. They knew she needed immediate psychiatric evaluation, but they also had a duty to protect those around her. As they escorted Sharon out of the house, her screams echoed through the night. She begged for Nick, calling out his name in a desperate plea for salvation. "Nick, please, he's here. He's everywhere. Save me, Nick. Don't let him take me." But Nick wasn't there, and even if he were, there was nothing he could do to pull Sharon back from the abyss she had fallen into. Police had no choice but to take her into custody, knowing that she posed a danger to herself and others. As the cell door closed behind her, Sharon's cries grew more frantic. She was convinced that Cameron was still with her, his presence suffocating, inescapable. In the darkness of her cell, Sharon's mind continued to unravel. She saw Cameron in every shadow, heard his voice in every whisper of the wind. The confinement only amplified her terror, and she clawed at the walls, desperate for an escape that would never come. Her cries for Nick became more desperate, more haunting, but they fell on deaf ears. No one could help her now, and the realization of her isolation only deepened her despair. It was a tragic end for Sharon, a woman who had once been so strong, so full of life. Now she was a prisoner not just of her cell, but of her own mind. The police knew that she needed treatment, but they also understood that she couldn't be released. Not when her actions had nearly cost an innocent life. The safety of others had to come first, even if it meant leaving Sharon to battle her demons alone. In the quiet of her cell, Sharon's screams eventually faded, replaced by soft, pitiful sobs. She curled into a ball, her body shaking as she whispered Nick's name over and over again, hoping that somehow he could hear her. But Nick was miles away, and even if he had been right outside her door, there was nothing he could do to save her from the monster that had taken hold of her mind. Sharon's story was one of tragedy, of a mind lost to madness and a life consumed by the very fears she had tried so desperately to escape. She had become a victim of her own psyche, prisoner of the ghostly figure that had once been a man named Cameron, and now there was no turning back, no redemption, no escape, only the cold, harsh reality of her confinement and the eternal silence that awaited her. As the days turned into nights, and the nights into days, Sharon's cries grew softer, her presence in the world fading like a whisper in the wind. The woman she had once been was gone, lost to the darkness that had consumed her. All that remained was the shadow of a life that could have been, and the tragic tale of a woman who had tried to fight her demons, only to be swallowed whole by them in the end.